I'm Jennifer Matos with the Noah Webster House in West Hartford Historical Society, and I'm bringing you the 43rd episode of the Armchair Tour of West Hartford history. I'm standing here in front of a colonial house known as the Sarah Whiting Talcott House, and it is located on New Britain Avenue in the Elmwood section of West Hartford. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the house and also about Sarah Whiting Talcott. So Sarah Whiting Talcott was a lifelong resident of West Hartford. She lived here from the 1850s until the 1930s, and she was well known within the community as an artist. The house that I'm standing in front of was the house that she was born in. She was born in 1856, and her parents, Henry Talcott and his wife Elizabeth Whiting Talcott, of course, lived here in the house. The house had been built in 1773 by a man named Samuel Stanley. And Samuel Stanley was originally from East Hartford. He came to West Hartford to actually purchase a fulling mill. So he was a fuller, which is somebody who works with wool. So he actually purchased a woolen mill on what was known then as Creamery Brook, what we would know of as Trout Brook today. And he built this house on a 1-acre parcel of land. It's a colonial structure house with a center door framed by a Greek Revival style portico. And what's really interesting about the house is that it originally stood facing New Britain Avenue on the northwest corner of New Britain Avenue and Quaker Lane South. So more on that in a little bit. In 1789, a man named Samuel Talcott, who was Sarah's grandfather, purchased the house from Samuel Stanley's widow. And gradually the Talcotts acquired land around the house, eventually compiling a 10-acre farm. They also ran the fulling mill on Trout Brook, which was down behind the house, and then also a woolen yarn factory at the corner of Quaker Lane and Park Road. They also served as a clothier for West Hartford. Samuel Talcott was married to a woman named Abigail Pantry Hooker, and she was the daughter of Sarah Whitman Hooker. So you may recall a previous episode when we talked about the Sarah Whitman Hooker house, which is located just down the street here on New Britain Avenue. So Sarah Whitman had grown up in the West Division, and she was actually part of a family who took advantage of slave labor. So we know that when she first married her first husband, Thomas Hart Hooker, they actually enslaved a man named Bristow. And of course, we know of Bristow as he has a middle school named after him today. He went on to purchase his freedom and live here in the West Division as a free man. And today he's the only African American to have a gravestone in the Center Cemetery. So Samuel and Abigail Talcott had 6 children, and their youngest son to survive childhood was Henry Talcott. He was born in 1815. He attended the local schools of the South District, which is the district we're located in right now, and later attended and graduated from the Academy in Farmington, which was considered to be a very fine preparatory school for boys. Henry Talcott was really considered in the West Division in West Hartford to be one of the most highly educated men in the community. He served as the first selectman of West Hartford for many years and was an advocate for improvements to the education system here in town. He became a civil engineer and for a number of years was the surveyor for Hartford County. So he lived in this house on New Britain Avenue and raised his family here with his wife Elizabeth Wells Whiting. And they have multiple children, and kind of right in the middle of the pack of kids is a daughter named Sarah Whiting Talcott. So as I said, Sarah Whiting Talcott was born here April 21st, 1856. She grew up here in the house. She would have attended West Hartford schools, and unusual for her time, she actually attended Vassar College. At the time, Vassar was a new college that offered young women a liberal arts education that rivaled any of the men's colleges of the day. She graduated in 1875 at the age of 23, and then she went on to study art with some of the most famous artists of the day. So she studied in both New York City and France. In France, she studied with Jules Lefebvre, who taught artists at the l'École des Beaux-Arts. She got instruction from a father and son team, Joseph and Tony Robert Fleury. And then when she studied in New York, she studied with a man named Kenyon Cox, who eventually taught artists about portrait painting. And in New York, she also studied portraiture and landscape painting with William Merritt Chase, who was a teacher at New York's Art Students League. As an artist, Talcott was known to paint portraits and landscapes, echoing the education of her teachers. In 1888, she took a position in Atchison, Kansas, for a year-long instruction in painting and drawing. Her father dies the same year, Henry Talcott, in 1888, and when Sarah returns home, she actually comes back to the house to live with her mother and sisters. Elizabeth Talcott passed away in 1913, and eventually Sarah would buy out her siblings' share of the house, and she actually spent the rest of her life living in the house. So she lived as an independent woman. She never married. She taught art lessons and sold her paintings and antiques out of a side room that had been added onto the house around 1900, and the side room was kind of located over in this section of the house, and I'll post a vintage image of it so you can see what it looked like. Sarah was a very active member of the community. She was one of the founding members of the Sarah Whitman Hooker chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, which was named for her great-grandmother, Sarah Whitman Hooker, and established in 1906. When the Elmwood Community Church was established in 1921, she became an active member, and she was also a part of the Hartford Art Club. On July 21st, 1936, Sarah Whiting Talcott passed away at the age of 84, and a few of Sarah's paintings actually remain inside the house, and they still remain there today, and I can also post a couple images of those, which so happy the current homeowner provided us with those. So I mentioned earlier that the house was originally located at the corner of New Britain Avenue and Quaker Lane South. So in 1955, the building was going to be torn down to make way for the new shopping center, which there is a shopping center there today on the corner of New Britain Ave and Quaker Lane. So on August 16th, 1955, the house was jacked up onto rollers and moved westward on a trailer bed, 3 blocks down the street to its current location to make room for the new shopping center, and here it stands today. The cost to move the house, we actually have the bill in our archives. It was $11,800. We've been just so fortunate as a community and as the Historical Society to have some of these documents in our archives, and it's really due to the owners of the house. So the owner who actually was instrumental in moving the house over here to this section of New Britain Avenue was a man named Harold DeGroff. So he owned it in the 50s up until 1986, when its current owner, Landy Goves, purchased the house, and she has been taking wonderful care of the house and continues to live here today, and has been very generous with donating objects and materials, ephemera that relate to the history of the house and the history of Sarah Whiting Talcott. So this is the kind of beginning of Women's History Month, and we talked about Olivia Shelton last week, and today I want to tell you a little bit about Sarah Whiting Talcott and look for more stories about West Hartford women in the coming weeks. Hope you learned something new. We'll see you next week.